the frozen ghost of the North. It was supposed to be just another winter expedition, a group of adventurers trekking through the wild, desolate forests of northern Canada. The kind of trip that promises solitude, pristine snow, and the raw beauty of nature, far away from the bustle of modern life. But I should have known better. Nothing ever goes according to plan, and some things should never be disturbed. My name is Ethan Hayes, and at the time of the expedition, I was an experienced wilderness guide, well accustomed to the harsh conditions of the Canadian North. The team that I led on this particular journey was an odd mix of people. Some seasoned explorers, a couple of university students researching the area's wildlife, and a pair of thrill-seekers hoping to document the ghost stories that floated around the region. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into. We set out from the small, remote town of Fort McMurray, under the impression that this would be a simple trip into the wilderness, a few days of hiking, camping, and documenting our findings. It was early December, and the snow lay thick on the ground, turning the world into a landscape of frozen white silence. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the temperature dropped steadily, and a thick fog began to roll in. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite place my finger on it. The journey was uneventful at first. We crossed the frozen river, climbed up hills, and navigated through thick evergreens that towered over us like silent sentinels. But then, on the third night, things started to change. We were camping in a clearing, far away from civilization, when we first noticed the strange sounds. First, it was subtle, an odd creaking noise that we assumed was the wind moving through the trees. But then it grew more distinct, like the sound of something scraping against ice. I dismissed it as nothing more than the natural sounds of a winter forest. But I saw the unease in the faces of my companions. It was the following morning when the true horror began. We were packing up camp when one of the students, Greg, pointed toward the dense trees at the edge of the clearing. Is that a body?" he asked, his voice trembling. First, I thought he was joking. We were in a remote area, but the idea of stumbling upon a body out here seemed almost absurd. But when I turned, I saw what he was referring to, half hidden in the snow. There was something that didn't belong. We approached cautiously, the wind picking up and sending sharp stings of cold against our faces. As we drew closer, I felt a chill run down my spine. What we found was not just a body, it was a man. Or rather, what was left of one. His body was perfectly preserved, as if he had been frozen in time. There was no sign of decomposition, no decay, no rot. His skin, a strange shade of pale blue, clung tightly to his bones as if he had been encased in ice for only a matter of days, not years. But what truly sent shivers through my bones was his face. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly ahead, locked in a permanent expression of fear or perhaps surprise. His mouth was slightly agape, and there was a faint, almost imperceptible grin curling at the corners of his lips. It was as though the man had died in a moment of terror but was now smiling, frozen in the embrace of death. I knelt beside him, my breath catching in my throat. This isn't possible," I muttered under my breath. The body looked so fresh, so alive, that it defied every law of nature. How long has he been here? A quick search of the area revealed nothing. No identification, no belongings, not even footprints leading to the body. It was as if he had simply materialized there, in the heart of the wilderness, without any trace of where he had come from. But before I could process what we had discovered, the temperature seemed to drop even further. The air became thick and dense, like a cold fog was surrounding us. I felt it in my chest, a heaviness that made breathing difficult. And then, I heard it, faint at first, almost like a whisper, a laugh. It was soft, almost childlike, and it echoed through the trees, reverberating in the silence of the forest. I turned quickly, my heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" I asked the others. They nodded, their faces pale and drawn. "We had to get out of there," I ordered everyone to pack up immediately, but the moment I turned my back to the body, the laugh grew louder. It was as though the very trees were laughing at us, mocking us. I tried to push the fear from my mind, telling myself it was just the wind, just my nerves getting the better of me. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. As we hurriedly packed our gear and prepared to leave, the temperature continued to plummet. The snow around us grew deeper, and the wind howled like a wolf in the distance. When we set off, I glanced back one last time at the body, and that's when I saw it. The man's eyes, they had shifted. They weren't staring blankly anymore. Now, they were watching us, following our every move with a chilling awareness that shouldn't have been possible. A scream tore through the air. It wasn't one of us. We turned toward the sound, but no one was there. Nothing but the thick, swirling snow and the eerie, unnerving silence of the forest. As we ran, the whispers followed us, growing louder. They weren't voices from the wind. They were voices from the man, the one who had been frozen in time, now alive in some strange, unnatural way. I could hear his laugh growing louder, mocking, as if it was chasing us, dragging us deeper into the heart of the forest. By the time we made it back to the nearest town, we were shaken, half mad with terror. None of us spoke much. We couldn't, not because we didn't want to, but because the words felt so inadequate. How could you explain what we had seen, what we had heard, when there were no answers, when the forest itself seemed to have become something else entirely, alive, aware, and far older than we could ever comprehend? I left that town soon after, unable to shake the feeling that the forest was still watching me. That man, frozen in death yet somehow laughing, had become part of the wilderness, a part of something that didn't belong to the world of the living. I don't know what he was, or what he wanted, but one thing is certain. There are things in the wild places of the world, things that defy all understanding, things that should never be disturbed, and I've never, ever gone back to the frozen north. Story number 2. Whispers of the Fallen, the Battle of the Bulge Ghosts. I always thought the Battle of the Bulge was a distant, almost mythical chapter of World War II, one of those brutal conflicts that textbooks described with grim precision but that felt too removed to touch my everyday life. Growing up in the small town of Eldridge, Minnesota, the tales of heroes and horrors from that winter battle were just stories told around the dinner table. That was until I found myself standing in the very snow-covered woods where those legends were born, and everything I believed was shattered by the whispers of the past. My name is Jack Reynolds, a history professor with a focus on World War II. My fascination with the Battle of the Bulge led me to Eldridge, a town with a rich, albeit tragic, history connected to the battle. The locals spoke of strange occurrences during the winter months, unexplained noises, apparitions of soldiers lost in the snow, and an ever-present sense of unease that lingered like a shadow over the town. Skeptical but intrigued, I decided to delve deeper into these stories, hoping to separate fact from fiction. It was late January when I received an old, weathered journal from the Eldridge Historical Society. The journal belonged to Private Samuel Hartman, a soldier who fought in the Battle of the Bulge and had disappeared during the chaos of the fighting. According to local lore, Hartman's spirit had never found peace, forever wandering the snowy forests in search of his lost comrades. Determined to uncover the truth, I arranged to meet with Mrs. Eleanor Hartman, Samuel's granddaughter, who still lived in Eldridge. Her eyes, a striking blue, held a mixture of sorrow and fear as she handed me the journal. "He never came back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Ever since that night, the woods have been restless." Armed with the journal, I spent days poring over Hartman's entries. They were filled with accounts of intense battles, the freezing cold that seemed to sap the very life from your bones, and the haunting cries of fellow soldiers lost to the elements. The final entries became increasingly erratic, filled with frantic notes about voices in the snow and shadows that moved with intent. One particularly harsh evening, as a blizzard raged outside, I decided to follow Hartman's last known movements. According to his journal, he had been stationed near a dense thicket of pine trees, where he last saw his unit. With my camera, voice recorder, and a deep sense of foreboding, I ventured into the woods, the snow crunching under my boots and the wind howling like the ghosts themselves. The forest was eerily silent, the storm reducing visibility to mere feet. I navigated through the thick snowdrifts, guided by the fading light and the fragmented directions in Hartman's journal. Hours passed, and exhaustion began to set in, but I pressed on, driven by the need to uncover the truth behind the whispers and shadows. As midnight approached, the storm intensified, and the temperature plummeted even further. It was then that I heard it, a faint, sorrowful moan carried by the wind. My heart raced as I realized the sound was coming from all around me, echoing through the trees like the lament of the fallen. I followed the sound, my breath visible in the icy air, until I stumbled upon a clearing illuminated by the ghostly light of the moon. In the center stood a figure, tall and gaunt, its form barely discernible beneath the layers of snow. The air around it shimmered with a cold, unnatural energy, and its hollow eyes seemed to pierce through my very soul. It was Samuel Hartman, or at least, the spirit of the man who had never left. "Why do you disturb our peace?" the apparition whispered, its voice a haunting echo of the past. "We are lost, searching for those who did not return." I stood frozen, unable to move or speak. As more figures began to materialize around me, soldiers from Hartman's unit, their expressions etched with pain and despair. The sight was both terrifying and heart-wrenching, a vivid reminder of the cost of war and the lingering pain of those who had perished. Gathering every ounce of courage, I stepped forward. "I'm here to help you find peace," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me what you need." The spirits seemed to hesitate, their sorrowful gazes never leaving mine. Then, one of them, a young private with haunted eyes, stepped forward. "We cannot move on until our stories are told," he said, his voice tinged with desperation. "Our sacrifices must not be forgotten." Realizing the weight of their request, I began to recount their stories, translating their silent pleas into words that could reach the living. As I spoke, the apparitions began to fade, their forms dissolving into the snowflakes swirling around me. The clearing grew quiet once more, the oppressive presence lifting as if a burden had been lifted. But the night was far from over. As I made my way back through the forest, the whispers continued, now a gentle chorus of gratitude and farewell. The snowstorm had abated, leaving behind a serene, untouched landscape that seemed to glow with a newfound sense of peace. When I returned to Eldridge, I compiled the stories of Hartman and his unit into a comprehensive account, sharing their experiences with the world. The town embraced the revelations, honoring the fallen soldiers with renewed respect and remembrance. The strange occurrences during winter began to subside, replaced by a sense of closure that had long been missing. Years have passed since that winter night, but the memory of the Battle of the Bulge Ghosts remains vivid in my mind. I continue my work as a historian, but the lessons learned from that encounter shape my understanding of history and the importance of honoring those who came before us. The Wendigo may be a symbol of insatiable hunger and desperation, but in the stories of Hartman and his comrades, I found a deeper truth about the human spirit and the enduring bonds of brotherhood. Sometimes, during the quiet moments of winter, I catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure moving against the snowfall, eyes filled with sorrow and gratitude. It's a chilling reminder that the past never truly fades, and that the spirits of the fallen will always watch over us, ensuring that their stories are never forgotten. So, as you brave the cold and gather with your loved ones this winter, remember the tales of the Battle of the Bulge Ghosts. Cherish each moment, honor the memories of those who sacrificed everything, and heed the whispers carried by the wind. For in the heart of every storm lies both beauty and terror, and it is our duty to protect the light that keeps the darkness at bay. Story number 3. Whispers of the Wendigo. I always thought that the legends of my Cree ancestors were just that, stories to explain the inexplicable and to keep us grounded in respect for the land. Growing up in the shadow of the vast Canadian wilderness, the tales of the Wendigo were recounted around the fire during long, cold winters. They spoke of a monstrous spirit, born from greed and desperation, that roamed the forests in search of prey during the harshest of winters. But it wasn't until the winter of 1995 that I truly understood the terror behind those stories. My name is Daniel Dan Thompson, and I had spent most of my life working as a wildlife biologist. My passion was studying the elusive creatures that thrived in the untouched expanses of northern Canada. The Wendigo, a creature of folklore, was always a subject of my academic interest, though I never believed I'd encounter anything beyond mere myth. That winter, a severe famine had struck our region, pushing the boundaries of survival for many. Supplies were dwindling, and the once abundant wildlife had become scarce. The pressure of providing for my family and maintaining my research team weighed heavily on me. Desperation was a silent companion, lurking in the corners of my mind, whispering doubts and fears. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape, I received a call from my colleague, Dr. Emily Harris. Her voice was frantic, tinged with fear. "Dan, something's wrong. We need to meet. Now." I grabbed my parka and rushed to her remote research station deep within the forest. The drive was treacherous, the roads barely visible under layers of fresh snow. When I arrived, the sight that greeted me sent a chill down my spine. The research station was abandoned, windows shattered, and the door hanging loosely on its hinges. Emily was nowhere to be seen. I ventured inside, the silence oppressive. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As I explored the station, I found signs of a struggle, scattered papers, broken equipment, and traces of blood leading toward the back of the building. My heart pounded as I followed the trail, the cold biting into my bones with every step. In the dim light, I saw her, a lifeless body sprawled on the floor, an axe still embedded in her chest. Emily's eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, her expression twisted in agony. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. This was no ordinary disappearance. Emily had been brutally murdered. Desperate for answers, I delved into her research, finding notes about increased sightings of unusual animal behavior and unexplained phenomena in the area. She had been investigating the possibility of a new predator, something beyond the natural wildlife. The mention of the Wendigo was unsettling, but I dismissed it as a product of local folklore. That night, unable to sleep, I decided to camp near the research station, hoping to uncover more clues in the morning. The forest was alive with the sounds of winter, howling winds, cracking ice, and the occasional distant call of a lone wolf. But beneath those sounds, I began to hear something else. A faint, mournful whisper that seemed to emanate from the very trees. I strained to listen, trying to make out the words, but they remained elusive, like the whispers of ghosts long gone. My unease grew as the night wore on, the temperature dropping to unbearable lows. The shadows danced around me, and every rustle of leaves made my skin crawl. Around midnight, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They spoke of hunger, of loss, and of a relentless search for sustenance. My rational mind struggled to comprehend what I was hearing, but the fear was undeniable. It was as if the very forest was alive, its voice a haunting reminder of the legends I had long dismissed. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a towering, gaunt shape covered in thick, matted fur that blended seamlessly with the snowy landscape. Its eyes were hollow and glowing with an unearthly light, and its mouth twisted into a grotesque semblance of a smile. The Wendigo, frozen in terror. I watched as it moved with an unnatural grace, each step deliberate and silent. The air around me grew colder, the chill seeping into my bones, numbing my senses. I could feel its hunger, a palpable force that seemed to reach into my very soul. "Why do you hunt us?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible over the howling wind. The Wendigo tilted its head, its hollow eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my heart race. It raised its arm, and I could see the glint of the axe protruding from its side. "We are driven by hunger, by the need to survive," it rasped, the voice a chilling blend of human and something far more sinister. Panic surged through me as I realized the Wendigo was not just a creature of folklore. It was a manifestation of the primal fear and desperation that had driven people to unimaginable acts. The legends had become reality, and I was standing face to face with the embodiment of our darkest impulses. Summoning every ounce of courage, I backed away, my mind racing for a way to escape. But the Wendigo moved with supernatural speed, closing the distance between us in an instant. His claws reached out, and I could feel the icy grip of death tightening around me. Desperation fueled my movements as I turned and ran, the creature in hot pursuit. The forest became a blur of white as I sprinted through the snow, the Wendigo's presence a constant, terrifying reminder of the thin line between humanity and monstrosity. The whispers followed me, a haunting echo that seemed to grow louder with each step. I could see no way out, the endless expanse of snow stretching out before me like a frozen nightmare. Just as I felt my strength waning, a sudden light broke through the darkness. I stumbled toward it, my lungs burning as I pushed through the snowdrifts. The light revealed a small cabin nestled among the trees, its windows glowing warmly against the icy night. I collapsed at the doorstep, gasping for breath, my body numb from the cold and exhaustion. Inside, the cabin was cozy and inviting, a stark contrast to the horrors I had just escaped. An elderly woman sat by the fire, her eyes kind but filled with a sorrow that mirrored my own. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, her voice tinged with sadness. "The Wendigo doesn't take kindly to those who seek to uncover its secrets." I saw it," I stammered, my mind struggling to process her words. "The Wendigo, it's real." She nodded, her expression grave. "It is, and it's bound to this land by the suffering and desperation of those who came before. To confront it is to confront the darkness within ourselves." As I sat by the fire, warming my frozen body, the woman shared stories of the past, tales of the Wendigo's origins, of the swift runner and the tragic transformation that had cemented its place in our folklore. Each story was a haunting reminder of the thin line between survival and savagery, between humanity and monstrosity. The night wore on, and the whispers outside the cabin grew louder, more insistent. I felt the presence of the Wendigo still lurking, his hunger unquenched. But in the warmth of the cabin, I found a semblance of peace, a fleeting hope that perhaps there was a way to break the cycle of fear and desperation that had birthed the creature. As dawn broke, the snowstorm had subsided, leaving behind a serene, untouched landscape. The Wendigo was nowhere to be seen, but its presence lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that can emerge when humanity is pushed to its limits. I knew that the encounter had changed me, instilling a deep respect for the legends that had long been dismissed as mere stories. Years have passed since that harrowing winter, but the memory of the Wendigo remains vivid in my mind. I continue my work as a wildlife biologist, but I approach the wilderness with a newfound reverence, understanding that some legends hold truths that transcend time and reason. The Wendigo serves as a symbol of our deepest fears and the lengths we will go to survive. A reminder that the darkness within us can sometimes find a way to escape. Sometimes, during the quiet moments of winter, I hear the faint whispers carried by the wind, echoes of a hunger that never fades. It's a chilling reminder that the Wendigo is always watching, waiting for the next desperate soul to succumb to its insatiable appetite. So, as you brave the cold and venture into the wilderness this winter, remember the story of the Wendigo. Cherish each moment, embrace the warmth of your hearth, and heed the warnings whispered by the wind. For in the heart of every snowstorm lies both beauty and terror, and it is our duty to protect the light that keeps the darkness at bay.